All right, welcome to the Jim Acosta Show, and it's another day that ends in Y and Donald Trump's assault on American democracy. Add to that his assault on global stability. Over the weekend, Trump sent a letter to Norway's prime minister warning that he, Trump, was no longer committed to peace as he did not win the Nobel Peace Prize. This as Trump is still weighing the idea of invading Greenland. Meanwhile, the ICE assault on Minnesota continues. Today, ICE raided a home in the Twin Cities where they grabbed a U.S. citizen apparently out of the shower. Here to talk about this is former Republican strategist Stuart Stevens with Lincoln Square. Stu also wrote It Was All a Lie about the modern day Republican Party. He also has a great piece just out in Substack about an attack on a synagogue in Mississippi. I do want to get to that in just a moment, Stu, but great to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Great to see you, man. I'm glad, that this whole Trump thing's really working out, I mean, as you know, Mitch McConnell said back in 2016, the presidency will change him.
Yeah, the mantle of the presidency will rest upon his shoulders, and he would be transformed into a modern day Ronald Reagan. So much for that. That didn't work out so well. But I mean, where do we start? I mean, I think we should probably start with Trump saying he's no longer committed to peace, telling the Norwegian prime minister he's pissed he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, but neither did you or I, Stu. So there is that.
Look, I had most congenial in the 6th grade, and I'm willing to give that to Trump as well. This transference of it's just also insane. And look, this is on Republican senators particularly. Yeah. This is what they're tolerating. This absurdity. And, in many ways, I think, Jim, there's a very simple through line here. We know the Russians, thanks to Marco Rubio's Senate Intelligence Committee, among other studies, helped elect Trump. Yeah. What Trump is doing is beyond the wildest of dreams of the craziest lunatic in the Kremlin. He's managing to have the United States go to war with NATO. I mean, it's over Greenland.
Can't make it up.
It really is. And, I just have such disgust for these Republicans. They're the legacy to the greatest generation, and nobody's asking them to charge a machine gun nest or take a hostile beach.
Yeah,
all they have to do is stand up for this oath that they took. And
whatever happened to Marco Rubio? I mean, he was the chair, I think, briefly of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he's the Secretary of State. I mean, he knows how batshit crazy this is, and
the same Marco Rubio who, by the end of his tenure as Secretary of State, is going to be responsible for millions of deaths of kids by shutting down USAID.
Right.
When people ask these questions, like what happened to Marco Rubio, what happened to Lindsey Graham, the only conclusion I can come to is nothing happened to him. The other was just a fraud. That when it was convenient, Marco Rubio would pretend to be, Time magazine put him on the cover, the Republican savior. And when it's not convenient, he'll be whatever Donald Trump wants him to be. And he was never very much to start with. He was sort of an accidental figure in Republican politics who was elevated by Jeb Bush. And I wouldn't be the first to say that, a lot of that was due to the fact that Jeb thought it was very cool. He was married to a former Miami Dolphins cheerleader, and he elevated him. And, in Florida, you can be legally a lobbyist and a member of the state Senate. And Marco was.
Wow.
And, my old client, Charlie Crist, who was governor, who should have run for re-election.
Yep.
But was engaged to a woman who wanted to live in Georgetown. So he decided to run for the Senate instead. And it was clear he was never going to win a Republican primary because he was too moderate for where the state was.
Yeah.
Where the party was. So then you get Marco Rubio. And Donald Trump just broke him.
Yeah. There's no question about it. I mean, he's just a different human being, it seems to me now. But maybe you're right. Maybe he was always that same person. And it does kind of add some irony to the term little Marco. But I mean, the other thing that we should talk about is how Trump just completely sells out to Russia and all of this too, because what's a bigger win for Russia at this point? Taking Ukraine or blowing up NATO, or I guess maybe he might get both.
Yeah, Trump's going to trying to deliver it all. If nothing else, we're not talking about Ukraine anymore. We're
Yeah.
not talking about the largest war of genocide since World War II in Europe. We're talking about Greenland.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent a couple of weeks in Greenland this spring. It was very cool. I encourage everybody to go.
Yeah.
We have a military base. We have military bases, multiple bases in Greenland.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's North Korea hovering over there.
I've been saying that. We already have Greenland,
Yes.
basically.
I mean,
Yeah.
what do you want?
Yeah.
When I was in Greenland, one of the sort of big subjects of discussion was there's a line in Greenland for which under that line you can have dogs that are not huskies, but above that line you're only allowed to have purebred huskies because they're trying to keep the breed pure. And that was the level of sort of social concern and discussion that was going on in Greenland. And now it's like, are we going to be invaded?
Yeah.
It's absolute madness. And, let me say, the Donald Trump today is the best Donald Trump. Tomorrow he'll be worse. And the next day he'll be worse.
And they're sending Danish special forces. This Vice got some video of Danish special forces showing up in Greenland. I mean, this is how pissed off they are. And I was talking to a Danish journalist that I'm friends with. I met at a conference a while back, and he was saying, we're part of NATO. Obviously, people know that. But he said, can you imagine being the Danish family of a soldier who died fighting in Afghanistan on behalf of the United States after 9/11, and then going through this? I mean, how disgusted must they be?
I have a SEAL friend who was in Afghanistan, and he said that the toughest guys were the Danes and the Norwegians. Their special forces were the absolute toughest. Yeah. Think about it. There's that wonderful tradition that they have in Scandinavia of honoring what America did. Like,
Yes.
What we did when we helped free Denmark and Holland, the way children go out and light candles at Christmas on the graves of the Americans and the Canadians, many Canadians who are buried there. And that was the America that you and I grew up in, a Pax Americana that brought the greatest prosperity in the history of the world to the West, that helped spread democracy. And now we're just rolling it back.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
We're at the 1 year mark of Donald Trump coming back into power. I mean, that's on Tuesday, and I think I saw you said recently, Stu, that you're worried that we already are an autocracy, that we've already gotten there. It just happened.
I think we are. I mean, look, you have a Republican Party that does not function as a traditional American party. There was always a quality of American political parties that at some point they would throw the circuit breaker. And, the Democrats wouldn't allow crazy George Wallace to become nominee. And Republicans didn't throw the safety breaker. And they are completely complicit in this, and Donald Trump is compromised by Russia. He's acting as a functional asset of the Russian Federation. And if you're a Republican senator and you're going along with Donald Trump, he is compromising you. You are compromised by Russia. And I say this to my old friend Roger Wicker, who helped elect John Cornyn, who I helped elect. I say it to John Thune, who I've known since he was executive director of the Republican Party. Guys, you are acting like Russian agents.
Right.
And this is going to be your legacy. No, you think that you're going to get remembered for like that money you got to build this bridge and this library, and maybe they'll name an airport for you in some obscure No, guys. This is what you're going to be remembered for. And
maybe they'll get a plaque in Moscow. I mean, it was reported today, the Kremlin confirmed that Trump has asked Putin to be on this board of peace for Gaza. I mean, this is some shit that you would think you would find in The Onion. But it says the Kremlin said on Monday that Vladimir Putin has been invited to join Trump's board of peace and that Moscow is studying the proposal. This is somebody who is basically he was a war criminal over what has taken place in Ukraine. He's butchered women and children in Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, and did so today. And I don't think the Biden administration did enough in Ukraine. I think the idea of being overly concerned, if you can use kind of such a trite phrase, about a nuclear response. I think that was ill thought. I think that once you give someone that power, they might as well have that power. I don't think that all the people I read that I find really compelling, like Timothy Snyder and Ann Applebaum, Putin doesn't want to commit suicide.
Right.
And he wasn't going to do this. But you didn't, so I don't think Biden did enough, but you didn't wake up in the morning saying, I wonder who the president of the United States, what side he's on.
Yeah.
And really, we can't ask that anymore about Trump because he's clearly on Putin's side.
No question.
And, you know, the degree to which the Republican Party has been compromised by Russia, I think is one of the great underreported, understudied stories of our time. And it's been going on for a while. I mean, you go back to early warning signs for the way that they funneled all this money into the NRA, and they were compromised by this. And then they clearly compromised the Heritage Foundation. And now you have that consistently for decades, the single greatest antagonist to the Soviet Union and then an expansive Russian Federation was the most conservative element of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And now it's the beating heart of the pro-Putin. And, the reason I wrote this book and called It Was All a Lie is because I don't know any other conclusion to come to. You don't say that you're a Ronald Reagan Republican, the guy that stood in front of tear down the wall, Mr. Gorbachev, and you go along with Donald Trump. No, either you're lying then or you're lying now. And I think all this stuff that we put out as principles for the party were just marketing slogans. So we'll be strong on Russia, bring down, okay, don't want to be strong on Russia, fine. We'll think Putin should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
It's the stuff that Republicans used to accuse Democrats of being
exactly
being soft on communists. And my goodness, the shoe is certainly on the other foot. Stu, the other thing I got to get you to talk about is Minnesota, because I mean, I just want to show this video of Greg Bovino. He's the head of the CBP. He is basically he looks like a little dictator walking around the streets of Minneapolis. And, he wears this Nazi era trench coat that, I mean, it's not cosplaying Nazis if you're doing the kind of shit that they're doing in Minnesota. It's not cosplaying fascists, it seems to me.
These guys are going to end up in jail. And it's up to the Democratic Party to come up with a mechanism to hold all these people accountable at the top, not just these thuggish agents. There has to be a trial of Stephen Miller. There has to be a trial of this guy. There has to be a trial of this ridiculous former Miss Snow Queen, who's Homeland Security Director. And I think the way it needs to, the Democrats need to talk about it is the role that states will play in this, because Trump is going to pardon all of these people. But fortunately, there's not a state in the union in which it's legal to kidnap and human traffic and assault and murder people. And that's what they're doing. So just as there was a coalition of state attorney generals that finally got the great tobacco settlement, there needs to be that kind of coalition of these attorney generals to go after these people and to have basically, our version of Truth and Reconciliation that they had in South Africa, except have more of a legal element to it, holding people not only responsible, but to have consequences.
Yeah, I mean, and just today, I mean, we showed this video too. There was a man from the Hmong community in St. Paul. He was picked up by ICE. They barged into the house and grabbed him. He's a U.S. citizen. Apparently, he was just taking a shower, and it's like 20 degrees below zero with the wind chill right now in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And he's walking around outside, being led around by ICE, frog marched by ICE, and he's in his underwear with a blanket over his back. Yeah. And then they drove around the block a couple of times, figured out that he was a citizen. I mean, this is some sick shit.
Yeah, listen, what I'd say to JD Vance is, you ever looked at your kids, JD? They don't exactly look like heritage Americans. No one is going to, cast them in the, remake of A Coal Miner's Daughter, And has there ever been a history of hatred and rage against Asian American immigrants. I kind of remember that there were, like maybe Japanese Americans and others.
Right. That's
And
right.
so what's it going to be like when this turns where you're not just going after brown people, where you're going after people like of another skin color? You think they're not going to come after your kids?
Yeah.
Really, JD? And
I mean,
you're going to say if, say one of your kids is out there trying to do the right thing and stop this, and an agent pulls a gun on them, they have total immunity? Really?
the mayor of St. Paul, apparently she said this at a congressional hearing on Friday, that we have received reports of federal law enforcement officers going door to door asking people where the Asian people live right now in our very own city. This is according to the mayor of St. Paul. She said this at a congressional hearing.
Check the vice president's residency.
Yeah.
I mean, how sick is J.D. Vance? He's married to a woman who is a citizen because of the 14th Amendment, and he's against the 14th Amendment. He talks about how it's perfectly normal to have bad feelings, or already said antagonism towards someone who moves in next door, doesn't speak the same language. That would be his family. That would be his in-laws.
And he says, we don't have to apologize for being white anymore.
Yeah. Well,
that's Klan talk, isn't it?
If ever there was a case to be made to apologize for being white, J.D. Vance would be number one put there as the thing. There's something about this that connects to what we were talking about earlier, how the Republican Party became everything that we said that we were against. It's the right, the far right particularly, but the right, that always talked about what the left wanted to do was have an army of masked men, a paramilitary federal force going around and going after American citizens. And that's what you have now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like the absolute info wars fantasy come to life.
And it's straight up authoritarianism, it seems to me. I mean, they're going after Minneapolis and Minneapolis alone, maybe because they don't have the numbers to do this in other cities, or this is the test case.
Minneapolis because the governor of was someone who said bad things about Donald Trump, ran against. That's why they're doing this. And it's the thuggish sort of behavior of Donald Trump. It's just who he is. He's a thug.
Yeah.
And
talk about ghosts that are still with us, Stu. You wrote this great piece for Substack the other day about what just took place. And because there's so much stuff going on these days, we miss certain headlines. I kind of missed this. You wrote about this on Substack. The Mississippi of 1967 has pushed its way back into the 2026 news cycle. Almost 60 years ago, on September 7th, 1967, the Beth Israel Synagogue was firebombed. And now we can add for the first time to the description, as the synagogue in the same location was bombed this week. It was subjected to a firebombing attack, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Stu? And tell us why you wrote about this. What does this mean?
Well,
in a larger sense.
I grew up in Mississippi during these days, and I remember very clearly when the synagogue was bombed. That was the summer of 1967. I was, as a kid, working in my first political campaign. And in those days, there was a phrase that people used about race, that if you were moderate on race, you were good on race. And my parents were moderates on race, and they were close to a guy named William Winter, who ran against the last avowed segregationist, John Bell Williams, for the Democratic nomination of Democratic nomination for governor. And then getting the Democratic nomination was tantamount to victory because there really was no Republican Party. And I worked for that guy. I write about this, and one of my most distinct memories, and one of the reasons probably had some profound push for me to go into politics. Winter got a lot of death threats because he was moderate on race. And, at that time, there was always this question, who could you trust among law enforcement? Because we now know that Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, the three civil rights workers who were murdered in Mississippi in Neshoba County, they were stopped by a deputy sheriff and turned over to the Klan. So when William Winter was running for governor in the summer of 67, he didn't have any security. I mean, most people who run for governor now still don't have security. But my dad had been an FBI agent, and he and some other either off duty or retired law enforcement, kind of tried to provide security for winter. And I remember so distinctly, Jim, being in a basement of a locker room of a high school football stadium down on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. And Winter was supposed to give a big Friday night rally when people still came to big rallies. And there had been a very specific death threat that he goes out there, he's going to get shot. Mm. And my dad and these other guys tried to talk Winter into not doing it, but Winter refused. He was going to speak. They went out and they got a big bulky bulletproof vest like they had then, and he wore it under his jacket. And then my dad and the other guys went out to their cars and came back with rifles and put them under long coats, and they went out there. And I just remember seeing Winter walk out. I think it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And so they now know that there was someone there that was intended to shoot him, maybe didn't because there was security. The recording of his death threat was wiretapped because at that point, the Justice Department was wiretapping so much in Mississippi going after the Klan. And it's in the tape is actually in a wonderful film about William Winter called The Toughest Job. Mm. But not shortly after John Bell Williams, segregationist, backed by the Klan, won the Democratic nomination for governor, the synagogue was bombed. And I think that it is so telling, the masked KKK agents who are out there. And now we have masked ICE agents out there. Now, are ICE agents like the KKK? No. But is the fear of being publicly acknowledged for what you were doing the same? Yes. As you know, you've covered it's better anyway. Law enforcement in this country has gone in the complete opposite direction toward transparency, toward body cams. And they say they're worried about being, outed or something. I mean, you have FBI agents to put DEA agents to put to testify in open court against narco terrorists, and are convicted by judges who aren't hooded.
Right.
And yet these, seems to be largely overweight, kind of steroided up, bottom of the barrel, last call at Gold's Gym, steroid hour ICE agents. Yeah. Are out there threatening people. It's just sick. And it's if you're a Republican, just let me tell you something, and somebody that I helped elect more of these people than anybody, this is killing you. Look at the numbers. Yes. People don't like this. She had it coming of a woman who was in a Honda Pilot who was shot 3 times in the face. That's a pretty small group. And immigration, a year ago was Trump's best issue. It's now one of his worst because of what they've done. And, when you look at this, in politics, we always say you either need a message or a really good message or a really good messenger. Or if you have both, go, wow, you're off to the races. Yeah. What is the message of the Republican Party? Why do you, if you're not already for them, which is an decreasing number every day, what are they doing to get you to vote for them? Yeah. And who are the messengers? I mean, they let Stephen Miller go on television. Yeah. Like Stephen Miller? Yeah. I mean, really? Yeah. One of the things that I sometimes think about and just, almost burst out laughing. Stephen Miller's children are going to grow up in a majority America. And hey, Stephen, there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. Maybe refound Rhodesia and move there. Bring your kids. I was going to say, maybe they can move to Greenland, maybe. Well, I don't think they'd like the native Greenlanders. That's probably true. Yeah. They'd have a tough time with all the different spellings of the town names and whatnot. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that, maybe the message these days is sort of Ivan Drago's message from Rocky IV, I will break you. And it's just not going to work because the American people, they're already standing up against this. And I think we're just going to continue to see that throughout this year. I mean, that's where we are, I think, as a country. Yeah, it's so incredibly dangerous. Yeah. A country with more guns than people. Yeah. And You start having armed thugs going door to door. This is just a recipe for just tragedy.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the civil rights movement, it was the federal government that was on the side of the good guys. And go back to Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman in Mississippi. You look at Mississippi burning or read the story. It was the FBI agents who came down.
That's right.
Who got these guys because of local law enforcement. And there wasn't an FBI agency office in Mississippi then, and they started one. When Eisenhower federalized the National Guard in Arkansas, it was to enforce Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Jim.
Yeah. Those idealists of the 60s, I tell you, if we need some ghosts to come back, maybe we can use some of those. It might come in handy right now, I tell you.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing. The thing that really, I have such little respect for these MAGA people. If there is a group of Americans who have a reason to be bitter, a reason to give up on the system, it's those who were tortured, murdered, laws passed against them to stop them from voting. And those are African Americans. But they never lost faith in the system. They didn't storm the Capitol. And yet these, Camp Auschwitz MAGA Republicans do. They gave up on America. And I think it's just so telling and so weak. And we talk about how we have to sort of understand these other people. I don't want to understand the guy in the Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt. I don't want to meet this guy halfway.
Yeah. There is no meeting him halfway.
Yeah. I just want him arrested and make sure he doesn't hurt others.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And on this Martin Luther King Day, the authors of nonviolence, of peaceful nonviolence, I think that is the way. And we're seeing that on the streets of Minneapolis. We're seeing this all across this country. We're seeing on No King's Days. And I think we're just going to continue to see it throughout this year. And it is going to swarm and overwhelm the folks who want to do us harm. And that's how I see this playing out. I don't see it happening any other way, because it's in our character to do it.
Yeah, it's betting on the wrong America. When Donald Trump goes out and tries to scare white suburban voters about non-whites moving into their neighborhood, I think it's a total a wrong assumption. It's a bad bet, because we know lots of people that live in the suburbs, lots of white people, and all the ones I know, if someone who was a different race or a different religion moved in next door, they would go out of their way to show their kids, this is how you treat people.
That's right.
And, your average teenager in Mississippi now, he doesn't want to be Robert E. Lee. He wants to be like a black rap star. It's a wrong bet on culture.
Yeah, no question. Well, Stu, always great to catch up with you. And
love what you're doing, Jim. I mean,
love what you're doing
every day, fighting the fight, and it's really out there on the edge of the spear, man. The tip of the edge.
Well, you've got the Statue of Liberty over your shoulder. I've got it over mine, and I believe in hope, and I think people got to hang on to it. I don't think this is any time to give up. I think they're the ones who are on the ropes, not us. Just may feel like it sometimes, but great to see you, Stu. Thanks a lot.
All the best. Take care, buddy.
Great message in that Substack too. Check it out. Thanks, Stu.
Thank you.
And I think Stu is spot on, and what we're seeing in Minneapolis play out. I think it calls for some expertise, somebody who understands what is going on from a law enforcement perspective out there, from a justice perspective out there, who's written on some of these issues and talked about some of these issues. And I haven't spoken with this gentleman in some time on the air, but I'm delighted to do it now. Elliot Williams, my old colleague. Good to see you, Elliot.
Good to see you.
Thanks for dropping by. And Elliot, we should.
Oh my God, I didn't
even get started here. Elliot is the author of a great new book. Let's put it up on screen so everybody can see it. 5 Bullets. It is about the vigilante Bernie Goetz. For the folks who are old enough to remember this, and there are some who watch this program, they'll remember him as the subway vigilante. and the trial that divided the nation. Elliot wrote all about this, and the way it's relevant now. It's relevant now in so many ways. But Elliot, great to see you again. It's really nice to catch up.
Absolutely, Jim. Really nice to see you. And, funny, relevant in so many ways, starting with what you were talking about with Stuart throughout that entire interview.
Yeah.
So much of American politics certainly since certainly the 2024 election and on to now is about safety. But safety masquerading as something else. What is public safety in cities? How safe are people? And what are political leaders saying about how safe folks are? You think all of this ICE business, I think, is at its core weaponizing this idea of how unsafe people feel, brushed over with a patina of racial resentment. And it's a lot of what we saw in the 1980s as well. That's sort of a big part of the backdrop behind the Bernie Goetz story.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to dive into the book and talk about the book. But Elliot, I remember from our old days, being on the anchor desk together and stuff like that, that you were former federal law enforcement. And then you, as we were getting ready to go on earlier today, you shocked me. You told me that you had worked at ICE. You had been at ICE for 5 years. And I just want to say, did I get this correct that you were an assistant director at ICE?
Assistant director at ICE, quite senior at ICE.
Okay.
And so, I'm quite an expert on the workings of ICE, for lack of a better way to put it.
Well, and there's ICE enforcement, and then there's what we've been seeing play out in Minneapolis, what we've seen play out in Chicago. But I mean, just today, and I'll just play this video again, Elliot, maybe you saw this earlier, but I'll play it again. A gentleman from the Hmong community in St. Paul was apparently grabbed out of his house. They didn't give him time to put his clothes on. He's in his boxer shorts and he's got a blanket over his head, and it's like 20 degrees below zero with the wind chill in Minneapolis. He was apparently picked up because they thought he was somebody that they were looking for. It turns out he wasn't, and he is a U.S. citizen. And this is just playing out over and over again. And this is a statement from the Facebook account Hmong American Experience, and this is written by a woman who is a relative of this gentleman, and said that he is a naturalized U.S. citizen, has no criminal record. And Elliot, I guess we got to start here. Your thoughts on what we've been seeing play out. Obviously, you have to have immigration enforcement in this country. We don't disagree with that. There are people who shouldn't be here, need to be removed. That has nothing to do with what I feel like we're seeing right now.
And, Jim, I really appreciate that you said that, and just sort of the broad, no nation on the planet has truly open borders. Everyone has some method of immigration enforcement. Now, what I will say, and look, let's just be blunt. You're in a bad place if someone who was from the Obama ICE department is saying, whoa, you guys, you went a little bit far there. You got a problem. So you know what I think we had when I worked at ICE that simply is not present right now. And that's a critical Congress. Any Congress that can step in and say, you know what, you guys are either not spending the money we've appropriated for you well, or you were just simply violating the civil rights of people. That's missing. And just a little bit of quick history for you. Back when at the beginning of the Obama administration, it was 2008, 2009, Democrats controlled Congress. And most of the heat from Congress came from within the Democratic Party toward the Democratic administration. It was criticism of how ICE enforced the law. And
I remember.
Yeah, it was for that first 2 years, it was very aggressive from Democrats. Zoe Lofgren was the chair of the House Immigration Subcommittee there, and really was pretty firm with the agency in terms of how it was doing things. And there were reforms put in to the agency and consistent oversight. Now, quite frankly, then Congress shifted hands, and Republicans took over. And then the criticism came from the right, which is you guys aren't deporting enough people. But what's missing right now is some grown-up, which would be Congress in any other normal time in America, to say this is too much, and this is not, number one, what the agency should be doing, and number two, what the law says and what Congress's appropriations, the money that's been sent, ought to be directed toward. That is just entirely gone. And
the other thing, Elliot, is, I mean, Obama did a lot of immigration enforcement. They did a lot of deportations.
Yes.
I remember covering this. I covered the second Obama term. There were folks in the immigrant advocate community who referred to Obama as the deporter in chief.
Yep.
People do not remember that, but that is something that occurred. It happened. But you guys did not do this. And I just want to show the video of Greg Bovino walking around like, I mean, he looks like, I mean, let's just, this is my characterization. He looks like a figure like right out of a 1940s film about what took place in you know, fascism back in that era. But like, why is Greg Bovino walking around in this long green SS looking trench coat? I mean, it's insane.
It's insane. And I just, you know, look, it's not revisionist history, Jim. And I am, I've gotten the social media comments. I've got, like, I get it. I know people were critical of the Obama administration as well. I understand. But that behavior would not have been tolerated. That sort of flexing and saber rattling at the highest level. That's a sub-cabinet officer. You know, that's so, I mean, to use the government speak, that's someone with a really, really, really big job in government.
And just walking around spraying people in the face.
And just sort but relishing the fact that the cameras are on. It's not like this was gonzo journalists picking this up. They want to be, you just look at their social media feeds. They want to be highlighted for doing this work. And I just think it's the turning the immigration enforcement into a bit of a public circus for the clicks and the enjoyment and the dunking on immigrants. That is where we've taken a really horrible turn. And again, a lot of it's Congress, a lot of it, you know, is the American people elected someone who said he was going to do this. I mean,
but they think the show is part of the deterrence, right? I mean, this was sort of the criticism of the family separation policy during the first term of Trump, which I covered, which is the optics. They think people will say, oh, you know, these optics are terrible for Trump. They're radioactive politically. But if you talk to the people inside Trump world, they like the optics.
It's the optics.
It works for them as a deterrent.
Yeah, it's the optics. But beyond that, it's also a lot of the other like egregious actions that ICE has taken over the years. So deporting someone who, let's say, is a Cuban or Jamaican immigrant, but deporting them to Mali or Mozambique or something, a place that they don't speak the language, don't have any family connections. That is designed to frighten people from being in the United States. Now, again, let's be clear. The law only requires that people be removed from the country. It doesn't say where to take them to, right? Yeah. That said, you're under no obligation. You don't have to do that if you're the government. You know, that it's incredibly inhumane to take someone that doesn't, even if they don't belong in the United States for whatever reason, to take someone from the United States and place them in an environment in which they don't know anyone, don't have any ties, don't have any community, don't speak the language. It is absolutely sadistic. And I say this as someone going back to the first sentence of your interview. Yes, I agree. We ought to have immigration enforcement, but just not in a sadistic, vicious manner as a means of just trying to get people not to come to the country.
Yeah. Well, and we should talk about your book because it delves into these issues of race. It delves into these issues of vigilantism. I guess back in the day, Bernie Goetz would have been embraced by MAGA.
Oh,
he would have been a figure of Fox News. And one of the interesting things that you write about in your book is that he became a darling of Rupert Murdoch in the early days of the New York Post.
So it's interesting. So a couple things. One, I interviewed Bernie Goetz. He has not. He has not interviewed, I don't think, for a book ever, and certainly doesn't do a lot of media interviews.
Oh, wow.
What was fascinating...
And he's still alive, obviously.
He's 78 years old.
I was like, oh, he's still alive.
Yeah, 78 years old, lives in the West Village in Manhattan, same apartment. And what's really fascinating about Bernie Goetz's politics, and they didn't come out, I didn't ask him what his partisan leaning was, but it's sort of this populist, like if you were to make a Venn diagram of Trump, RFK, and quite frankly, Bernie Sanders, this sort of the elites and the bigwigs and the fat cats are out to get you, and they're out to get me, and they're all lined against us, and they don't care about public safety. It's sort of this critical of government populism that he has right now. I think he's pretty Trump adjacent. A lot of the things he said to me seem to, at a minimum, he felt that or feels that the media singled out and targeted and persecutes Trump or persecuted Trump. And he feels that they've done that to him. Ever since he opened fire in that subway car, he has been the persecuted one. And there's just this constant sense
of a kinship. He feels a bit of a kinship with Trump.
Yeah. He absolutely does. And he feels that, they turned on Trump just like they turned on me. And if people really knew the truth, they wouldn't turn on either of us.
And we should just have, for the folks, the young kids who are watching, or the young adults who are watching.
Right.
3 days before Christmas, 1984, Columbia University wrote up your book. This is how they wrote it. Aboard a number 2 subway train, Bernard Goetz, a 37-year-old white electrical engineer and Manhattanite who was obsessed with the city's crime problem, opened fire on 4 black teenagers from the Bronx. Though the teens were acting rowdy, they had not mugged or assaulted Goetz or any other rider. And these 4 young men, they were all wounded, but they weren't killed.
Right. Although,
go ahead. No, you.
No, I say so they're all wounded, gunshot wounded. Yeah. Surprisingly, not horribly, the 3. And then one whom Goetz stands over and is believed to have shot and then said, "You don't look so bad, here's another," and shot again in his chest. He's paralyzed from the mid chest down and ends up ultimately in the hospital. He goes into respiratory arrest, goes into a coma, ends up brain damage for the rest of his life.
Wow. And this story just electrified the New York tabloid media. And it was a media sensation in this country for years. Yeah.
And I digress talking about my interview with Bernie Goetz, but your question was ultimately about Rupert Murdoch. Right before the shooting, just a couple of years before, Rupert Murdoch had bought the New York Post and had shifted its coverage toward sensational sex and crime and just disorder stories, big headlines, splashy headlines, but really designed to frighten people, really about crime. And all of the tabloids in New York sort of followed suit. So you had the Post, the Daily News, and Newsday all in this race to frighten people even more and shock them about how bad the public safety climate was in the city. And to some extent, Bernie Goetz came out of that and was, number one, a citizen of the city who was purporting to be frightened and scared and always carrying a gun everywhere and terrified in an objectively rough city, but also who was lifted up by the New York Post and the tabloids, lifted up as quite a hero. And I really get into that in the book 5 Bullets. Like what is it that makes these heroes that many in society choose to lift up for carrying out these violent acts?
Yeah. But Elliot, I mean, what's interesting about the Murdoch thing is that it is very reminiscent of what they do on Fox on a daily basis, the way they drive up the outrage in the hostility surrounding big crime stories, and they do it all the time, all day long on Fox. I mean,
there's a line in the book. It is no surprise that Rupert Murdoch, that this ultimately led to the creation of Fox News in about 15 years. The example I use in the book when sort of pulling back and talking about some of the things we live with today that we lived with in 1984, but that really are the heart of who we are as Americans today: race, crime, fear, and lifting up of vigilantes, right? And also media bias. But one of the things I talk about is, think about how many times on cable news you see toy stores being looted or CVS's being looted, but not, and here's the example I use in the book, parks right here in New York City. Like, this is why I look like I'm in a prison right now. I'm in a hotel room in New York, but right here in New York City, Bryant Park, just a couple blocks from where I am, used to be an open air drug market. There is now a Whole Foods across the street from it. That's not getting shown.
No, it's not.
It's not. But what you're seeing are the images of the CVS being looted, because that's what frightens people and whips them up and tells them that they're more scared. And that's sort of a big subtext of my book, 5 Bullets. Like, what is it about fear and what frightens us so much and how everybody got so scared and ultimately led to this shooting in 1984, but also affects everybody today?
Yeah. And I tell people this all the time who and I say this on my show from time to time, people don't understand what is going on in New York City unless they actually live there or visit there or work there on a regular basis. I think it is still regarded as the safest big city in the world, if not one of the safest big cities in the world. And you can go to, I wouldn't advise going to Central Park at night. But you can go to Central Park, you can go to Times Square, you can go to Bryant Park, you can pretty much go anywhere in Manhattan, and it's going to be okay. And the way Fox was, drumming up all of these stories about Mamdani and what was going to happen in New York if he got in there and all this other, it's sort of, they completely, avoided the elephant in the room, which is it is a relatively safe place to be.
Yeah. So a couple things on that. One, I spent a big part of the beginning of Five Bullets talking about the climate in New York in 1984, where it was legit rough, Jim. It was
a shithole back in those days.
It was a shithole back then. I mean, I'm not going to say I was born there. I'm not going to call it a shithole, but it was, well, let's put it this way. Let's not use the term shithole, but let's say it had a homicide rate of 2,000 a year, which is 4 times what it is today. So it was,
and the subway was horrible, and Central Park was dangerous.
Subway was dangerous. And so all those things now get to today, and this whole fight over National Guard in big cities is about the public perception of how safe cities are.
That's
right. The data suggests that they are objectively safer. I just quoted homicide rates. Now, even if people don't feel safe, we're not in a position where, like it was decades ago, in which literally walking down the street, you might fear homicide or a serious assault. So what is it that empowers leaders now to act out in the way that they do, or at least govern in the way that they do around public safety and sending National Guards in and so on? Well, it works. And when people get scared, they tolerate a certain level of, number one, action from the government in the form of troops walking down the street, but number two, vigilante behavior. And a lot of people legitimized and accepted that kind of vigilantism that came from a guy like Bernard Goetz.
And did Goetz express any remorse or regret?
In fact, Jim, he was unrepentant in my call with him. And actually, the question I asked him in my interview, and I talk about this in the next to last chapter, chapter 27 of the book, Five Bullets. I asked him, do you feel you committed an act of public service? And he actually says, those guys needed shooting. They needed to be shot.
Wow.
That's not why I shot them, but they needed to be shot. And for him, it's almost eugenics. It's almost thinking that there are just irredeemable people in society and we should be rid of them. So no, there's no remorse. If anything,
wow.
And something we all know is, frankly, as our parents age, people calcify in their views. And I think he's just sort of dug in on the things he believes, but he's gotten not apologetic's not a word. It's actually unrepentant and in fact, almost boastful about the act.
Wow. Well, it's a fascinating book. And I think that, I think folks need to check it out. It's very relevant. It sounds very relevant to a lot of what
we didn't even, real quick, we didn't even get into the Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely, the subway choking in New York City.
That was
literally the same case, the same
it's
story.
Literally the same case.
Something violent happened in the New York City subway. A white guy vigilante, or a white guy, whatever you want to call him, stepped in for the safety of either himself or others, committed a violent act, killed somebody. It's literally the same case, governed by the same law, which is State versus Goetz, the case that governed the Daniel Penny case. So we're living it all constantly. And that's a lot of what the book Five Bullets is about.
Yeah. And I love that it delves into some of the darker forces in our media trying to exploit these kinds of stories for financial gain and political gain. And it's that, like that old expression, it's history is not one thing after another. It's the same damn thing over and over again.
And last one, or next one. The other thing I would say is it's not just the themes and the topics, Jim, that I think keep coming up. It's literally the same people. It's Rupert Murdoch. The big characters in my book, Five Bullets, are Rupert Murdoch, Rudy Giuliani, Al Sharpton, Curtis Sliwa, and the NRA, which funds part of his criminal defense. Literally, they are the main characters that were sort of circling around this story.
And you're so right. Rudy Giuliani rode the same wave to power as well. I mean, that's how he did it. Elliot, great to catch up. Great to see you, man. Good luck with the book.
Great to see you too, Jim. Wow.
You're in book mode. When I did my book, I was like, got to do this interview, got to do that interview. But it looks terrific, and it really seems like you work very hard on it. So
it's a slog. It's a labor of love. It's the real Churchill had said that it's a hobby, a fascination, a spouse, a mistress, then a tyrant, and just as it's a dragon that's about to kill you, you slay it and throw it out into the world, which is actually it's still killing me. I don't know if I'm ready to dispatch this.
I hear you, man.
Churchill says, but I'm nearing the end. But
when I did mine afterwards, I said I will never do this again, and because it was like giving birth. And I know I shouldn't say that because
you should not say that. But
no, but the same thing. But it was excruciating by the end.
Yeah, I mean, I did find parts of it to be joyous, and even writing about old New York some of the city that I remember as a kid, even in the grime and disorder, it actually was like sort of like
That's kind of
I
cool.
felt a certain way writing it. So that was special.
That's great. And I'm a New York file too. I don't know what you call it. I'm one of those I Heart New York guys too. Both my kids were born there, so I've lived there a couple of times. It's got a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
But Elliot, great job, man. Really appreciate it. Really nice to catch up. Good to see you.
Thanks. Always happy to talk to you, Jim. All right, that was wonderful.
Terrific. All right, sounds good. Let's do it again. All right, good luck with the book. Elliot Williams there. Check out his book. And I just have to say, because this was one of those. It was one of those weekends in DC where it was cold, it was miserable. I didn't go out a whole lot, and so I looked at my phone too much. I was sort of like JD Vance this weekend. I was on the socials a little too much. One of the things that I noticed was that Elon Musk came after me. I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but I guess some asswipe on Elon Musk's website wrote about Jennifer Welch and I. I was on her podcast, the I've Had a Podcast recently. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun. I said the F-bomb way too many times, which is true. But I guess we also had this discussion about how, one of these days there will probably have to be prosecutions of people in the Trump administration for, violating the law. It seems like that would be something that would have to happen at some point. And here we are talking about it. I don't know. I guess we could play it. And then the MRC thing that you see at the top, this is one of those conservative groups. They take clips of other folks and rag on them. So that's what that is all about. But Jen and I talked about this, and Elon Musk retweeted this and said, they mean it. They mean it. We're coming after people. Jen and I are a couple of podcast hosts. We do not hold any kind of role in law enforcement. Although if you become a podcast host, apparently you can be the FBI director, you can be the deputy FBI director, and so on. So maybe Jen Welch and I will run the FBI someday. And if that's the case, then we may have to weigh the idea of prosecutions for some of the turkeys and clowns and criminals that Donald Trump has working in his administration. But Elon Musk retweeted that and he said, they mean it. When this person wrote, Democratic activists Jim Acosta and Jennifer Welch say mass prosecutions of Trump and Republicans would be necessary for national reconciliation when Democrats regain power. And, and expanding the Supreme Court would be required to jail Trump. A couple of things. And do we have all night? We don't have all night. So I'll try to be as cogent and concise as I possibly can, as an old history teacher of mine once said. It seems to me, when you are grabbing a U.S. citizen, like we saw over the weekend, out of the shower, pull him out of his house in his boxer shorts, allow him to put, I guess, a blanket over his shoulders into 20-degree below wind chill weather in Minneapolis, and parade him in front of the public in the way that they did with this member of the Hmong community in the Twin Cities. Absolutely disgraceful, horrendous behavior on the part of our federal government. It does raise the question whether ICE is totally out of control, whether this administration is totally out of control. And this is just one of many examples that we've shown you recently on the show. And this is within the last couple of weeks after the killing of Renee Good. And as I talked about on our show on Friday, the New York Times and others reporting that she still had a pulse, a faint pulse on the scene when a doctor showed up after she was shot in the face and chest, said, I would like to help. And I said, no, stand back, sir. We don't want you to do that. And then she dies. It seems to me that an independent investigation should occur, that the state of Minnesota should have the ability to investigate that. The state of Minnesota should have the ability to investigate whether ICE went overboard and pulled that man from the Hmong community out of his house in his boxer shorts in sub-zero wind chill temperature. I mean, this is the story of the Times. Emergency call transcripts about the Renee Good case. It said that she still had a pulse. But Stephen Miller and JD Vance say that these agents have absolute immunity, that they can't be touched by law enforcement, that they can do whatever they want, which is not true. At least it wasn't true up until this point in this country. And so it seems to me that crimes are being committed in broad daylight, not by members of the Minneapolis, St. Paul community, but by our own government, by agents and officers of ICE. And you have the head of the CBP, Greg Bovino, swanning around in Nazi-like clothing. Does anybody know what the hell is going on in this country? This is some sick stuff, folks. What is the head of the CBP doing dressed up like a Nazi? Can somebody answer that question for me? And so it does seem to me that we have some big problems in this country. One of the problems that I talked about on the show with Jennifer Welch, and you can find it on her I've Had a Podcast YouTube page, or I put it on mine as well, is that Donald Trump was given a blank check by the Supreme Court. He was told that he is above the law, and he is acting like it, ladies and gentlemen. He is acting like it. He said he was only going to be a dictator on day one. That was definitely not the case. You could throw that out the window. He's been acting like that ever since. And ICE and the Department of Homeland Security are both behaving as if there are no checks on their authority, that there are no checks on what they can do, that they can grab people out of their homes despite being a citizen, despite having constitutional rights, and their civil rights can be abused without any kind of punishment or accountability whatsoever. It flows down from the top. And so it seems to me that yes, Elon Musk, yes, there needs to be accountability in this country. Look what you did with Doge. You went through like a bull in a china shop, all of these federal agencies and departments. You hoovered up all the personal data of all these Americans around the country, and then you waltzed off to do God knows what with that information. You closed agencies like USAID. You closed other important agencies of the federal government without any say whatsoever from the Congress. And yes, that may be, I suppose, that could be argued out in front of the courts, and it may be the purview of the executive branch to do some of these things. But Elon, we're not talking about putting you in jail. I mean, unless there's something we don't know about. What we're talking about is what is taking place in Minneapolis right now. That an agent of ICE can go out and murder in cold blood an American citizen, can shoot her in the face, and that the federal government can say after the fact that there is no accountability, that that officer has absolute immunity. The American people aren't going to tolerate that. And that is why there are people, good Americans from both sides of the aisle, who are saying that, yes, there needs to be an era of accountability, Elon Musk. There needs to be an era of accountability after the departure of Donald Trump from the scene. As much as Democrats these days are talking about affordability, there needs to be a lot more talk, it seems to me, about accountability. And how do we get there? And so I stand by my comments. I stand by the comment that it is very likely the Supreme Court will have to be expanded to accommodate other justices. So the John Roberts immunity decision can be thrown out. It is an abomination. It is anti-democratic. It is anti-constitutional. It is unconstitutional. It is un-American to think that a president is above the law, that a president can act with any kind of checks on his power in an unchecked way. That is not who we are. That is not America. That is not the Constitution. That is not what the founders intended. Donald Trump incited an insurrection on January 6th. That case was proceeding under Jack Smith, and it was blown up by the Supreme Court. Does that mean that Donald Trump is allowed to incite other insurrections? That he's again allowed to try to subvert the elections of this country coming up in the midterms this fall with no accountability? Is that the kind of country that we want? It's the kind of country that Elon Musk wants, it seems to me. But Elon Musk, this is not South Africa. This is not apartheid. This is America. And the year is 2026. And I say, let the era of accountability begin. My thanks to Stuart Stevens. My thanks to Elliot Williams. My thanks to all of you for watching. Don't forget to support independent media by subscribing to this program. Consider becoming a paid subscriber. You can do that on either Substack or on YouTube. And it means a lot, means a whole lot to the team here. It helps us do what we do every day. And I'll be talking about that more in the coming days. One other quick little plug. I'll be at the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C. with Mehdi Hasan and Joy Reid on Tuesday, the anniversary of Trump coming back into power. I shouldn't use the word anniversary. It's not a joyful thing. But it is 1 year since he came back into power, and we are having a big discussion in front of a big audience there at the Howard Theater in D.C. If you want to get tickets, I have put out some posts to that effect where you can find that information. So join us if you can. It should be a great conversation. But in the meantime, still reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta. One final thing before we go. I want to show you what the Nobel Peace Prize Committee tweeted out earlier today. They tweeted out a video of Martin Luther King, somebody who did win the Nobel Peace Prize and earned it, and some of his comments when he accepted that award. We'll play that out as we say goodbye on this Martin Luther King Day. Thanks for watching.
To accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war, that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality.